Noah, some new faces in town, new names to get used to. Along with that, you have like a nickname you go by, or something that your friends might call you, or something that we wouldn't know about?
There's some stuff back in the day. Kind of embarrassingly, some of it was, partially self-appointed, but Levick the Legend was used, at times. N Cube was used. I think it was.
Where's the Q from, though? The middle name?
Playing football at overnight camp.
Okay.
I kind of like the concept of like I'm everywhere, like I've got you blanketed. Right. When you're trying to beat me at corner or whatever. That was not my best one. Levick the Legend, some people
I ain't mad at that.
Use that back in the day. I am not asking anyone to do that moving forward. Noah is great for me. I enjoy that one. So
no, I like your name. You got a cool name. We both got the biblical names, Daniel, Noah, but I never had many nicknames. A couple of my friends used to try to call me Scoop for a little bit, but that never stuck. But I'm a big nickname guy, though. So let's try to figure out exactly how Daniel House pronounces it. You listen to the pod, and you'll find out, what we know. Boom, boom, boom. Open up. It is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, and Ben Berry with you once again. So glad you could join us. And we are closing in on opening day. One game has transpired since the last time we spoke to you guys, and the Sixers are on the home court at the Wells Fargo Center in South Philly. Joel Embiid, James Harden, Danielle House, PJ Tucker, all on the floor. It was good to see you in person, Noah, at the game. And I love spotting you in your element. And you need to check out Noah's observations on our website, NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, after last night's game. The overarching thought, Noah, he is back like a fast Batman. I mean, we got to borrow from Darius Slay, bro. Tyrese Maxey, 2 games, 15 of 19, 41 points. All first half action. They said the kid has been putting in, incredible work. You point out in your article, and I think it's a great point. This is the preseason, but man, it continues to look like a stock on the move. It is a bull market for Tyrese Maxey, Noah.
Yeah, he has been the no-brainer story of the team's first 2 games. And I think you figured, okay, all the starters are playing, as we discussed last time, and the Embiid Harden pick and roll and PJ Tucker and some of these veterans might be the story. And nope, it was very much Tyrese Maxey. I thought Dave Yeager made a great point post-game that if he converted a couple of fast breaks, the kid would have been 11 for 11 from the floor, which is just wild to think about. But yeah, Dave Yeager was speaking to us because Doc Rivers was under the weather, not coaching last night for that reason. But Tyrese Maxey is just so exciting to see the continued growth. And I think the variety in the offensive game just stands out to me. I think the play of the game for him last night on my end was he gets this cross-court pass from DeAnthony Melton and doesn't take the 3. And perhaps his rookie year, you would have thought, oh boy, he's a little hesitant to let it fire, and he's just not super comfortable from 3-point range. And then you contrast that with last night, and nope, the reason he didn't shoot was the Cavs are closing out on him really hard. The pump fake is awfully convincing, and he takes a smooth dribble into that mid-range game, which looks more and more polished each time we see him. So it's just very cool to watch this kid preseason, regular season, postseason. And I think that is awesome for the Sixers to see heading into the real deal. So yeah, that was that. We got to talk about Tyrese Maxey, and I don't think anyone minds doing that.
Nothing like the pump fake and relocate. I love that. And bro, you said it. Preseason, postseason, regular season, off season, summer league, whatever it is, bro. This dude is continuing to be appointment television for basketball fans. And I'm just really curious how I'm always interested in how the Sixers and their players are portrayed nationally, and I see more and more. I mean, it's hard to deny. I mean, more and more of him popping up on national blogs and outlets. So it's just something that, and again, it is just preseason, but to see his continued growth and to hear about the work he's put in and to see, the attitude and the exuberance and the youthful injection that he brings to the team. And like you said, there were guys out there with more pedigree, with more, awards and experience. But the way he continues to show up and show out is just one of the things that, as a Sixers fan, it is very uncanny to witness that they have a homegrown talent like him that is blossoming like this. I mean, how many times have they missed in the draft? How many times have they selected the wrong guy or, outthought themselves or what have you? And, you can think about what they could have done and who could be with Maxey, but just Maxey himself and what he brings to the team, quickly rising up the charts. And I tweeted it last night, rising up the charts of Philadelphia athletes. I mean, you got guys like John Kruk from the Phillies, like
Big fan.
Bro, I'm talking about we saw Maxey come to the game and the way Kruk interacted with him, but it's different if you're working and then he shows up and you have to talk with him. Like he's on Twitter with like 20 exclamation points, talking about Tyrese Maxey. And I forgot the other point I was going to make, but that in and of itself speaks volumes.
That's a good and important point. I do think, the Cavs big name all-star guys also weren't too shabby last night. And the Sixers first unit defense was not its sharpest. I believe Cleveland started 6 for 7 from 3-point range. And a lot of that was just sloppy, rusty sort of defense as far as closing out, just a little, just not sharp, and the scrambling, not being in regular season mode, biting on some pump fakes. Again, nothing to be deeply concerned about, but Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell also showed they've got some game as well. I believe those two combined for 28 points and 9 assists in the first half. So not quite Tyrese Maxey level last night, but those matchups against Cleveland, I think, provided everyone's healthy, are going to be really entertaining this year. A lot of talented young guard play on both squads. But yeah, with Maxey, just continuing to move in the right direction. And I do think he's going to be hard on himself defensively. He has made it a point that he doesn't want to be a liability. He doesn't want the Sixers to have to alter their defensive schemes. And that is a big reason why he added this muscle in the offseason to try to become a more well-rounded player in that regard. I think just talent-wise, defensively, he has the ability. The added muscle should help, but that part of his game is going to be important for this team. It's going to be scrutinized, and he's going to hold himself to a high standard. So I'm curious to see whether he can make some good progress in that area as well. I think it should be attainable, especially just given, as we discussed last time, the Sixers' overall defense is stronger, and therefore being an aggressive defensive player should be doable for Maxey. Should be able to fight through screens, should be able to apply ball pressure, and perhaps we see that area of his game thrive a little more, or at least become perceived as less of a weakness around the league.
If you had to give a number, 1 to 10, on what you think his defensive acumen was last season, do you have an idea of what that might be?
Yeah, so I guess this probably says something about my personality. Whenever I get a 1 to 10, I always like to just know what parameters we're going on. So what's the 1 and what's the 10 here?
Well, I like the 10 as stalwart defender, and 1 would be subpar defender. So where do you think he fits in the spectrum?
Like barely NBA quality defender, and 10 is like,
yeah, I would say, yeah, like 1 would be like Ole James Harden,
okay,
from Houston, and then 10 would be Michael Jordan, all defensive team, defensive player of the year guard type thing.
Gotcha. So I think last year, my gut feel is like a 4.5 or a 5 for Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah.
I don't think there were many games where he was noticeably below average or making constant mistakes, although there are a few that come to mind where his miscues were costly or his assignment had a big impact. I think back to the Nets game in Philly where Brooklyn just totally blitzed the Sixers, and he made a bunch of uncharacteristically youthful mistakes against Seth Curry, giving him too much space to shoot, again, being overzealous on the pump fakes, and not being especially strong off the ball. I do think off the ball, he has some room to grow. And the Sixers expect that'll happen, that his instincts will become a little more fine-tuned as he learns what gambles are worthwhile and he studies tape and knows tendencies. So, yeah, I think that would be my gut feel, 4.5 or a 5. And if he can raise that a point to 5.5 or 6, I think that's a big deal for the Sixers. And we know playoffs, it often boils down to matchups and finding the weakest defender on the floor. So for him, just don't be the weakest guy. And if they do target you and they think that's viable because you're 6'2", then show them, nope, that's not a great idea. Although he joked last night that he's 6'3", he gives himself an extra inch in his own little personal listing. But no doubt, height-wise, he's a below-average guard, and he is noticeably, stronger. His arms are bigger. He's really sturdy lower body-wise, and the hope is that allows him to cope a little better when teams do see him as a mismatch moving forward.
Yeah, and there is a leap there that is available for him to take, and you think the quickness on offense and his lateral agility would translate to the defense, but like you said, it's just more about, instinctual things and knowing, what's smart and what's not. But I definitely was disappointed in him in that area last season, and was frustrated at times with the consistency of his defense. So the fact that, he's, quote unquote, working on his offhand and weaknesses and trying to improve in those areas, I think is vitally important. And considering he's taken such leaps in those other areas of his game, like 3-point shooting, the playmaking, the confidence, the mid-range game. And it was a short while ago where that floater was like, we used to see from him so much. And we saw one last night and you kind of forgot that was a part of a great part of his game. And I think the thing for me is I hope that, he continues to just, like he said, I think he said last night, just be a sponge and like absorb all the things that, he talked about absorbing, some of the moves and things that James Harden is telling him, and he can absorb those defensive things as well. And I think as a team, as a city, it's just incredible to see, a player like him blossom in the way that he is. And credit to his work ethic and credit to his family and him being such a great individual. But it's like, one of those stories, and it's weird because I don't even think there's hype surrounding him. Like there's not even like, he's still like an overachiever in some aspects. And I don't know if that's like the draft position, but there's not even, I don't even think, maybe the expectations are more, meted out and spread around to the Embiid, Harden, PJ Tucker, Tobias Harris people. And he gets to like, being a little bit of a cocoon and a shell and like continue to like move forward. But I don't even feel like the expectation, like people are still wowed by some of the things he does on the court rather than like expectant of it. Even though you still feel like his jumpers are going to go in, there's not like as much of like the pressure, I think, surrounding him. That's just a personal perception.
Yeah, I think that's on point. I think we've heard a million conversations about the level of pressure and expectations on Harden and Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey does get to fly a little under the radar for that reason. And I think also just what the Sixers are telling him internally again and again is be yourself. Like, we're not asking you to do anything extraordinarily outside of your comfort zone. And perhaps that was less the case last year when Ben Simmons was absent and
Right.
a lot more playmaking responsibility was on Maxey's plate. But now it's just be a pure scorer, be faster than everyone, put tons of pressure on that defense, and just have fun, bring us energy, and be you. And I think being in a position where that's possible is obviously fantastic for a young player, and he's taken it and run with it. I will also say with the defense, it's a two-way street where the Sixers are really committed to his growth there. Just speaking with Spencer Rivers over the summer, this is an every game sort of deal where he will cut clips, he will bring them to the front of that team plane if they're on a road trip, and Sam Cassell and Doc will also have stuff to add, and then they'll be reviewing those, in detail. So every single game they are going through, this is this little mistake you made defensively, and here's how you can be better moving forward. Or here's an opportunity where you could have been more aggressive and you might have missed it. So this is not just, having high aspirations as a defender and not really putting in the legwork. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Obviously, we've seen that translate offensively. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's unrealistic to think that he will make defensive strides. But of course, defensively, there's not an unlimited ceiling. Because of his size, and he's no Ben Simmons, but I do think he should be better in that department, and just him continuing to improve in these various aspects of the game is indeed, I think, reason to be excited as a Sixers fan.
Maxey, far from the only player on the court last night. We mentioned the return of the Sixers' projected starting five with Joel Embiid, PJ Tucker, and James Harden, the three missing starters that weren't on the floor. They didn't look fantastic, and give some credit, like you said, to the Cavaliers, who came out shooting hot, where the Sixers weren't as hot. And Kevin Love was definitely looking the part last night for sure. But with that said, listen, that's part of the reason they went away to Charleston, to try to build some of this camaraderie in a silo and everyone continue to grow and be on the same page. There's still a few weeks before the regular season begins. And while they were a little out of sync, Joel wasn't quite, was a bit disrupted by Jared Allen, and, the shots weren't quite falling for PJ Tucker. We still got to see these guys on the floor. What impressions were you left with, Noah, as you watch these guys do their thing?
Yeah, I think offensively it's a little clunky, and there's some work to do with spacing and some of the nuances of their execution as expected. I did think Harden had 2 or 3 explosive moves where he got where he wanted to go and just didn't make the shot. I believe there was one where Dean Wade crossed
touched
up
earth.
And
touched earth.
Drew some oohs and ahs from the Wells Fargo Center crowd. Then there was another nice right to left crossover where it's like, wow, I forget who was guarding him, but that guy wasn't even close to staying with him, and Harden just couldn't quite finish at the rim. So you don't want to read too much into that stuff, but I do think if you're searching for encouragement, Harden definitely gave you a bit. That was throwback Harden.
That was some throwback Harden right there.
I did feel the throwback vibes. And then speaking of plays that made you think of the past a little bit, the PJ Tucker sequence where he dives on the floor for an offensive board, and then a couple seconds later he's tapping the ball out. All the Sixers were raving about that after the game. The fans loved it. And it is one of those plays where it just feels so much bigger than a single possession. And you can imagine that. You don't have to imagine that, right? In a playoff game, the Sixers know exactly what that feels like when Tucker just single-handedly sort of rips a possession out of the other team's grasp and does make these momentum-turning plays. So 0 points, didn't do anything eye-popping, but you already see those kind of hustle, intensity, effort plays. Yeah, those plays matter. They do matter a lot more than whatever the box score is going to reflect. So yeah, the starters not their best night, but we imagine there will be many better ones moving forward. And then there's some interesting, stuff to think about rotation-wise and who is going to play behind those starters and what the best combinations are. The Sixers were, of course, closer to a full-strength team last night, so there's at least a little more that we can reasonably read into, although Dave Yeager was predictably taking the stance of we're a work in progress and, none of this stuff is finalized quite yet. And indeed, October 18th, we got almost 2 weeks. So there is still plenty of time for things to twist and turn with who makes the Sixers opening night rotation. And I'm also looking forward to Saturday. We get the blue-white scrimmage. And I think if there's one matchup you're going to highlight there, it has to be Paul Reed versus Montrezl Harrell. How can you not want to watch those two go at it on Saturday in Wilmington, Delaware for this blue-white scrimmage?
Yeah, let's dive into some of those things you mentioned for sure. Bro, tell me if you do this, though, sometimes. When I'm watching the game and Harden makes Dean Wade hit the ground and he hits the shot, but Wade clearly, falls into him. Harden was, beside himself, as he can get sometimes, but super valid of why he didn't get the foul call. And then there's, this intimate conversation with, him and the ref. What can the referee say at that moment to kind of justify missing that call? I'm always I can't read lips, but I'm just reading body language and stuff like that, trying to glean something from that. Do you do that sometimes?
Yeah, I think especially with the stars, referees give them a lot more leeway. So, based on the mic'd up conversations we've seen over the years.
Oh, yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, I think oftentimes those discussions there's some acknowledgement on the officials' end that I might have missed that one. I'll be looking for X and Y moving forward. And then perhaps it turns into a broader dialogue. I know, talking to Danny Green last year, who's had many exchanges with refs over the years, his personal stance is you want to be respectful and treat them as humans and definitely try not to cross certain lines as far as cussing them out or saying they're bad at their job. But you focus on a specific play where they made a clear mistake. I think you're more likely to have success down the line is the way that these veteran savvy players look at it. So it's okay. Just so you're aware, he's elbowing me, on the side. Please look out for that moving forward. And then you try to lobby for yourself looking ahead. So I think that's what the players who are best at it do, but everyone has their own method. James Harden, keeps some of that close to the vest, but we know he does have his dialogue with the officials, and he's learned over the years certain methods that are unique to him with drawing some whistles that are favorable.
It makes me think of that classic Iverson John when he's talking to the ref. He's like, what I do? What I do? He's like, Allen, you're not turning this crowd against me. Yeah,
it's all about mutual respect. I thought that was a really smart perspective from Danny Green. Anyone who's reasonable, if they make a mistake, they're going to acknowledge they made a mistake, but just don't make it about you're terrible at your job. Absolutely screwed up the entire game by missing that one play. Just, okay, you missed that one, right? Please, moving forward, he's doing this when I'm running this action. Please keep an eye out for that. And you're going to give yourself a better chance. And that's what it's all about. You don't want to let your emotions get into it too much. You want to try to help yourself score points more efficiently. And mutual respect, tends to be conducive to that, I think.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Speaking of emotions, man, you highlighted the blue-white scrimmage, which will be in Delaware at the Blue Coats facility on Saturday. You talked about that Montrezl Harrell versus Paul Reed matchup, kind of strength on strength, motor on motor. But bro, it's just funny, players on other teams, and you have seen them a ton of times, but when they play with your team, it's a little bit of a different connection. And seeing Trez hit the go-ahead bucket last night, seeing the energy that he brings, the tenacity, the toughness, you know, and you see it with NFL players a lot, but him playing with the fronts of his mouth, it's just a certain vibe and a certain approach to the game that he brings. And you could say it's like Dennis Rodman-esque in a way, just the way he is so determined when he's on the floor. So which way you leaning on that matchup, though? Like if Paul Reed versus Montrezl Harrell, where are you going with that?
I think Paul Reed deserves to be where he is right now, which thus far he's gotten minutes over Harrell, and it's not as if Harrell played badly last night. Did have the fouling out situation in Brooklyn, curbed that problem this time around, but man, Paul Reed has been really impressive to me. A lot of the skill that we knew he had before as far as defensive versatility. And I just think he has a very large advantage over Harrell in that category. You see him last night blitzing 25 feet out, and he just rips the ball from Osman's hands. Montrezl Harrell that far out, it's not usually going to go well. And I think with Paul Reed, you do see a little more maturity and discipline with the defensive approach. He has avoided foul trouble thus far, which is great. And there are a few specific plays that stood out to me where in years past, he likely would have gone for a last-ditch gamble. He would have been ticked off that he was beat on the initial angle of the drive and, reached his arm out hoping for a back tap. And there's one last night where Donovan Mitchell beats him, and okay, you tip your cap. This is a lost cause, and you move on. Give him 2 points, and you don't allow him to get an and one. You don't allow yourself to pick up another foul. So, man, I think Paul Reed has put himself in a strong spot, and the Sixers seem to like what he's done during training camp, during preseason. I don't know how I would call it right now, and I think it's also difficult to say exactly how they see it. Of course, the first game was muddied by Embiid not being there. And then last night, both guys certainly had plenty of positive moments. And I wouldn't be surprised if the head-to-head blue-white combat actually plays a decently sized role in who ends up getting minutes on opening night and where those are. But I think, as we've noted before, just because we haven't seen it yet doesn't mean we can exclude PJ Tucker from this picture. You do expect that in playoff situations, in important moments, him as a small ball option will be significant as well here.
We, talked a lot last season about Paul Reed's development, some of his smaller moments when he, missed that fast break dunk, when he, was very aggressive with the fouls and some of the chiding he received from Doc Rivers. But he has to have turned the corner and endeared himself to this coaching staff by that work ethic this offseason, because they can't stop talking about it. Dave Yeager talked about it last night. He was one of the names in the high, we gotta force him to stay out of the gym, guys, out of Doc Rivers' mouth. So it does go to show, it's not the same path for every player. It's so subjective, but you put the work in and results will come. You know what I'm saying? So I just, obviously being from Philly, you relate to that blue collar mentality so much, but, going back to the bubble when he talked about, doing push-ups in his room and, all those extra calisthenics and things like that, like he is determined to be, more than what he was perceived to be. And you got to admire that.
Yeah, just a little tidbit that folks might not know. His uncle played NFL football, Mike Sims Walker, and he worked out with him, some in the off seasons. And I do think you see perhaps a little of that old school football mentality that you're talking about, where just his identity as a basketball player, grit and out toughing the other guy matters a lot to him. And I think that translates to productive play in large part due to natural gifts with athleticism and quirky movement. But man, the effort is a big part of who this guy is and a big part of why, as a 58th pick, that he is in a strong spot to be playing major minutes right off the bat for a team that wants to be a contender. I did want to mention that you were talking about draft misses quite fairly, but man, Paul Reed at number 58 looks like incredible value. And I think you'd have to go back a long way to find picks in the 50s that were this good. One of the first that comes to mind is, I believe, Manu Ginobili was in the 50s. Paul Reed is nowhere near that yet, but he's darn good for a pick in the 50s. This is really rare that a guy drafted there cracks the NBA, let alone, does valuable things for a playoff caliber team. Dave Yeager did talk about how they want him to shift his approach offensively, which I thought was interesting. We know that in the G League, he showed off the Euro step and the three-point shot and just this odd variety of skills as an offensive player. And now the emphasis is just quick decisions. And he said, a la Draymond Green, like, just basically don't hold the ball too long. Like, the ball is going to find you. And when you get it, do whatever makes sense and is sensible fast. So hand the ball off to James, or, run a quick pick and roll with Tyrese, or just do something quick and play with that energy offensively in a way that doesn't stagnate our team. So that is something he's working on as well. And I'm curious to see if he can develop in that department. I do think, compared to the average center, he's probably more qualified to be a facilitator and be creative offensively, because that's not something he hasn't done before. But this mindset is going to be interesting to see if he can adopt it in the way the Sixers hope.
Last topic to hit, Noah: rotations. Difficult to read directly into what happens one game to the next. Obviously, we didn't get to see several guys. We haven't talked about Daniel House. We looked fine last night, but those guys don't play Tucker, Embiid, House, Harden, and Brooklyn, and then they start here at home, and the Sixers back on the court Monday in Cleveland. So that game will be really interesting to see what the rotations are, who's playing, who isn't. But they went 10 deep before we saw Furkan or Matisse. Are you making anything from that? You made inferences about when Paul Reed played and when Montrezl Harrell got on the floor, who hit the go-ahead bucket in the end. But are you reading as much into where they're positioning Furkan and Matisse? And we had talked the last podcast about maybe Furkan and Shake really competing for time, but last night might make you think that even, Furkan is even further down the rotation. What's your perspective?
Right. Well, I do think with Shake, as I mentioned, Doc Rivers has consistently been high on him. And this is a player who finished last season strong and does bring some ball handling skill to the table on a team that likely will need that on its second unit. So notable, but not surprising to see him at the moment looking like a rotation player in the regular season. But I do think Thibault and Korkmaz not appearing until the second half, that's significant. And again, we got that unusual look at the live streamed practice from training camp. And those guys were both starting out with the red jerseys there as well. So it does seem consistent with how the Sixers have had their pecking order thus far. And look, it makes sense because they acquired Daniel House for a reason. They think he's going to be a valuable two-way player for them. And also in the public comments, two-way players has been a point of emphasis and something they feel really pleased with. And I don't think there is a ton of confidence quite yet that Korkmaz and Thibault meet that description. So yeah, these guys definitely don't have anything cemented for the time being. I don't think we necessarily need to read into it in the sense of there's no way Korkmaz or Thibault are in the mix on opening night. But I think, yeah, these guys not playing until the second half, that matters. And that's, of course, a change from how things were last year. And it's unfortunate for Matisse Thybulle because the first shot he gets memorably thuds off the side of the backboard. And that's not a great first impression to make in a game. To his credit, he didn't stop shooting, though he missed a couple more threes. I believe he did score in a driving layup. And, he's got some stuff to prove here still. And just you think about it from the other team's perspective, the very sensible approach to take is still, we'll believe it when we see it, as far as him being an improved shooter. So important week or two here for Matisse Thybulle, perhaps coming forward. I think if he's impressive defensively and shoots the ball better, then makes a case for himself to be in that opening night rotation, have a key role, etc. But looking like there's a real chance that does not happen.
What's more demoralizing to you think, as a shooter? Your jumper hitting the side of the backboard, your jumper hitting all backboard, or hitting the top of the backboard? What do you think is worse from those three?
All right, so yeah, I would think
top of the backboard is wild.
That's what I was leaning toward. Yeah, just like
that's like when all the football players come in the gym and have them shoot.
Yeah, like you don't really know how to shoot. Side of the backboard, I can rationalize as a basketball player not feeling too bad about that, because it doesn't necessarily mean you missed by that much.
Right, you just slightly off. Yeah,
I go the three. It shouldn't happen, but shooting the top of the backboard, that means you were off target by at least a couple of feet, which isn't ideal. So I think I would lean in that direction.
When you're on the wing and shoot all backboard, bro, that personally just hurts my heart. Like, he's like all backboard, like boom.
I think I would still go just a good old fashioned air ball that doesn't touch even the net.
Anything.
I think that's the worst, because there's just a pride, humiliation element of not having the strength to reach.
Right, you can't even follow your shot. Like, you can't even be the first person to touch it. Like,
yeah. So I think no one wants an air ball. You hit the side of even good players hit the side of the backboard here and there. So that one is not something to be ashamed about if it's a relatively uncommon occurrence, I think.
Ben Barry hitting us on the chat asking, what's worse, getting dunked on or getting stiff-armed?
That's a good one. Do you have thoughts?
Bro, getting dunked on, I don't know, man. That just is like, stiff-armed is like, get up and, go at it again. Like, you were in the right position at the right time. You just kind of got overpowered. Like, getting dunked on is like, you can get dunked on and not see him coming. And it's like, oh, like a big surprise. Like, like a lamb for the slaughter type thing. Or you go body to body with somebody thinking you're going to get the block and boom. So I would go with getting dunked on. What
Absolutely.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think with getting dunked on, there are times that you're putting in an honest effort and it just goes horribly wrong for you. You're stepping in bravely to try to take the charge or whatever. But there are also times you're just kind of being lazy.
Trying to take the charge and getting dunked on is the worst.
That's rough. But I also think there's not a small percentage of times where you get dunked on because your rotation was slow, or you were just kind of being casual defensively and not coming out bravely to contest the shot. And as Ben says, getting stiff-armed is the cost of business. I think if you play football, that's going to happen to you if you're a linebacker or a safety or whatever. So there is something uniquely dismal about getting dunked on. I have to think that is a terrible experience for anyone who's lived it.
Going back to the rotation, we talked about Thybulle and Korkmaz, who we didn't see till the second half. We ain't see Isaiah Joe at all. We saw Jaden Springer. We didn't see Trevelyan Queen. We didn't see Isaiah Joe at all. It can't be good for Isaiah. I was surprised by that. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I think that's a curious one. I don't really know what to make of it. I think
I didn't like the look on his face either. He looked like what's going on? A little out of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a strange night with the normal head coach not behind the bench. And I think to some extent we have to take Dave Yeager at his word that parts of this internal competition are still open. And it wouldn't make sense to close it at this stage. The the opener isn't until the 18th. They do have a lot of time to make decisions. But, yeah, I'm not sure if I was –
boy can't get some shots up. He can't get no burn. Got splinters in his butt.
Right. If I was in the position of, trying to evaluate or trying to choose between players at the end of the roster that I really need to see Julian Champagnie or Charlie Brown Jr., not to say those guys deserve 0 preseason minutes, but I would like Isaiah Joe to play, would at least be my perspective. So that's a curious one. I'm not too sure what to make of it. I think it had appeared that he was clearly above Queen and Bassie in the pecking order. Those guys also did not play last night, but it does leave you wondering what the deal is with Joe. I think my gut feel would still be he makes this team, and he's a Morey draft pick. He's a young player, and he's capable of being an NBA rotation guy if called upon, so that things still work out for him. But I am left questioning that overall impression a little after last night. That was a bit of a strange one.
Now, clear it up for me. Who are the two-way player guys that are on that bench?
So Champagnie and Charlie Brown Jr. are. Although the Sixers with Morey, I know they like to be fluid with their two ways. So it's by far a guarantee that those guys are in that position for the remainder of the year. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, if they like Michael Foster Jr. more than one of their two ways at one stage, wouldn't shock me if he slid into one of those spots. He's currently on an Exhibit 10 deal. But yeah, Champagnie had a nice night in Brooklyn. I believe he had 15 points, shot the ball well. And then last night had some more of those ugly misses that we were just discussing. I think he had a long air ball, which is different than a short air ball, but it was from the corner, and it was a good 2 or 3 feet long. So he was not calibrated too well quite yet to the Wells Fargo Center rims. But yeah, for those who don't know him too well, played at St. John's, has a twin brother, Justin, who's in the NBA with the Toronto Raptors. And yeah, his reputation is that he's a shooter, and if everything pans out for him, that he's a 3-and-D NBA wing. But for now, he's one of the Sixers' two ways, along with Charlie Brown Jr., the St. Joe's kid who got a shot here last season as well.
Rotation stuff definitely worth monitoring heading into Monday's game. And when do they have to get down to their roster before the 18th? Like when is that line of demarcation? Yeah,
so I believe it's just 5 p.m. The day before the start of the regular season. So they give you plenty of time to figure it out. And it makes all the sense in the world to wait as long as you can, I think. So it's not necessarily like football or even hockey where you see these intermediate cuts. It's really just a couple of guys that probably will be let go near the very end here. We know Michael Foster Jr., like he's not going to be a Sixer. He's going to be a blue coat. But then beyond that, still some things to be determined.
All right. Before we get out of here, last thought. Are we in the midst of a name change, bro? I've been calling the dude Daniel House forever. I heard someone at Media Day call him Daniel, and he answered to that. I've heard Kate Scott call him Daniel. I thought his name was Daniel. I looked it up on YouTube to see him back in college, called himself Daniel House. Do you have any information on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I apologize because I think we have been getting it wrong. I think it is Daniel. That is the official pronunciation. And just chatting with Kai Carlin, who does good work for Sixers Wire, he recently spoke to House one-on-one, and it is Daniel. So good to know. Yeah, I think maybe just a polite guy, and when people call him Daniel, he doesn't correct them. But I do believe.
Bro, I looked up the YouTube clip. It was a video. It's like a name pronunciation website. In the video, it's in video of him saying his name, and he goes Daniel House. So
yeah, it might be a situation where neither is especially wrong, based on that evidence. But I do think at a minimum, Daniel is correct. It is not wrong the way I might have thought previously. So you can call him, D House. You can call him House. But I think Daniel House is thumbs up for the newest Sixers wing.
Because if you call Terrell Owens Terrell, you're going to have a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think House is an affable guy. But no, this is a question I had recently it was before the preseason game in Brooklyn. We got like the official pronunciation, and I was like, all right, we're good with, Furkan Korkmaz. We haven't been screwing that one up, Matisse Thybulle. And I was like, oh, it is Daniel. And I asked Kai about it, and that is the deal. So for those looking to pronounce these new guys' names, now you know.
Hey, they can't all just be PJ, right? Who that's
right.
Not even his real name or his initials.
Yeah, no, it's they've all got their own thing, and now we know for Daniel.
Check out Noah Levick's work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Follow him at Noah Levick. Ben Berry, I am Ben Berry. I am D. Pommells, NBCS. Check us out and hang with us. We are enjoying this process. More podcasts will be coming out regularly here as the season ramps up. So 2 this week, and we're going to shoot for 2 next week as well. We'll probably join you Tuesday after Monday's game. So be on the lookout for that podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Keep those questions, thoughts, comments, ratings, suggestions. Keep it all coming. Get down there in the comments and do your thing. For Noah Levick, I'm Danny Pommells and Ben Berry. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. This is the Sixers Talk podcast. See you next time.